Hello, everyone, and welcome to the June 12th episode of Pub Talk Live, the live publishing talk show airing the second and fourth Saturday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern. I am your host, Sarah Nicholas. I'm a young adult author, a board member and agent liaison for Pitch Wars, and a library event planner. You can subscribe to reminders via email by clicking on the link in the description so you don't miss a show. You can also follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Pub Talk Live. And I did want to let y'all know I have an upcoming workshop next Thursday about finding a literary agent. It may be a little kind of 101 for some of you, but if you know anyone who's kind of like getting interested in that, you can send it to them. It's $10 workshop. It's probably going to be my last one for a while. And if you'd like to support the show, you can find a link to the Patreon near the end of the video description down below. As a reminder, this is the second month. The second Saturday of the month is going to be Author Journeys, where I talk to an author about their publication experience. So that is what we're doing today. I think that is all the intros. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our author today. Judge Deborah H. Goldstein writes Kensington's Sarah Blair Cozy Mystery Series. The fourth book in the series, Four Cuts Too Many, came out last month. She also is the author of Should Have Played Poker, a Carrie Martin and the Mahjong Players Mystery in 2016, and the 2012 IPPY Award-winning Maze in Blue, a mystery set on the University of Michigan's campus. Her writing has been honored by being named as finalist for the Agatha, Anthony, Derringer, and Silver Falchion Awards. Deborah serves on the national board of the Mystery Writers of America and is president of the Southeast chapter of MWA. She previously was on Sisters in Crime's national board for 5 years and was president of its largest chapter, the Guppies. So please welcome Deborah to the show. Hello.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me tonight.
Hi. Thanks so much for coming on. So we have our viewer poll today. If you haven't yet voted in it, you have about 28 minutes to do so. And the question is, when do you think you'll be returning to larger in-person bookish events? And that question is actually courtesy of Jennifer, who's in the comments as Coastal Magic Convention. She came up with that on Wednesday. So thanks, Jennifer, for that question. And while we're talking about that, Deborah has a virtual event that she wants to plug a little bit. It is called Mystery in the Midlands.
Mystery in the Midlands is a combined event co-sponsored by Sync Chapters, Palmetto Chapter, and Southeast MWA. And it's from 10 to 2:45 on Saturday, June 26th. That's Eastern Standard Time. And it's got a dynamite thing of people. 3 panels and 1 guest speaker interview. But the panels are historicals with Carolyn Todd, Laurie R. King, and Laurie Rader Day. Suspense with Robert Dugoni, Yasmin Ango, and Alex Segura. And short stories with the masters, Barb Goffman, Michael Bracken, and Frankie Bally. And of course, there's an interview, the key speaker. If you've ever watched Bones, Kathy Reich is going to be our interviewee, and she's the guest of honor. And I get the honor of interviewing her.
Nice. Very cool.
And
so
I put the link in the...
Yeah, I put the Facebook link in the chat, so feel free to go check that out. It's going to be fun times. It's funny you mentioned, so I have a podcast. We talked about this, Queries, Qualms, and Quirks. And this week was Mia P. Manansala, who was on it. And she talks about Laurie Rader Day, kind of in the early parts of her career. Laurie helped her a lot. So cool.
She's mentioned a lot of people.
Yeah, I've heard. All right, so we're going to start talking about publishing news. If this is the first time watching the show, we cover publishing news from the last 2 weeks. And I'm going to remember before we start. So at the end of the show, I do put the links for each of the articles that we're going to talk about in the description. So if you want to learn more about any of the things that we're going to talk about, you can read the full articles there. Some of them this week are pretty good. So we'll start with some fun news. President Barack Obama will keynote the American Library Association's annual conference, which is again all virtual this year. He will be the featured speaker at the closing session on June 29th and will be in conversation with Lonnie G. Bunch III, who is the first African-American secretary at the Smithsonian. So if you are in the library world, that may be something you want to check out.
A whole bunch of Goodreads readings and reviews seemed to disappear last week. Most of them were 5-star reviews. Goodreads clarified to Publishers Weekly that the actual issue is how the statistics on a book page displays, and that they're actively working to fix this. So if you had lost a few, that might be why.
Did you see anyone talking about this week, Deborah, in your circles?
I haven't.
I saw a couple people talking about, like, on Twitter and Facebook. My good friend Jose Iriarty was one of the people affected. Which it was weird because it happened, and of course it's Goodreads, so like they're not good at communicating, and
well, and because they were owned with Amazon, I wonder if they also took off the Amazon ones.
I didn't see anyone talking about Amazon reviews. I follow a lot of indie authors, and they talk about their Amazon reviews a lot, so I feel like I would have heard. But my first thought was, so I don't know if you know how Amazon like polices their reviews. Exactly. Basically, if anyone has ever like tweeted at you or friended you on Facebook or looked at you from across a crowded room, like Amazon doesn't allow them to write a review of your book. And so at first I thought maybe they were like instituting that policy on Goodreads or something, but it seems like it's just a glitch. So that's good. All right. We Need Diverse Books, the organization, has announced that they will no longer be using the term own voices. They say that publishers' use of the term in marketing has been used to place, has been used to place diverse creators in uncomfortable and potentially unsafe situations, end quote. And so they will use specific terms to indicate creators' identities when they can, instead of using own voices. I will say, because this came up actually on Agent Chat Live on Thursday, that doesn't mean that creators can't use it for themselves if they feel like it's a good identifier for themselves. This is just We Need Diverse Books deciding not to use it in their kind of own publicity efforts. So it doesn't mean that like if you want to use it as a creator, you have to stop using it, of course.
Well, the next news feed almost ties into your question today. The Frankfurt Book Fair, which is the first large book fair to return to an in-person event, has announced that they will do so in October. They say that the event's going to be smaller on scale and more focused, and they'll have some virtual events, but much fewer than last year. All of the major German publishers and 93% of the major European ones have committed to attend. However, North America and UK publishers are slow to confirm.
Yeah, this is one article that, like, if you're interested in this kind of thing, like I am, like events and publishing, the intersection is like my jam. It's an interesting article, and I recommend you check it out. But we'll see if they're obviously thinking positive, right?
I think a lot of them are.
So they're thinking that they'll probably see some publishers, American publishers, confirm closer to the date. So we'll see if that happens. All right, another one of my intersecting interests, libraries. Overdrive, which is the leading digital book platform for libraries and schools, has acquired Kanopy, which is a popular video streaming service for libraries. Kanopy allows library users to watch about 30,000 films, including documentaries, children's videos, and shorts. If you've never used Kanopy, it's kind of cool. It has kind of like a lot of indie movies or indie documentaries on it. And I actually watched What We Do in the Shadows on it. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't. But tell me how that all worked out.
Yeah. So What We Do in the Shadows is from, what is his name? Taika, I don't know how to say his last name. The director of Thor Ragnarok. Mm-hmm. He did this kind of like fake reality show about vampires.
And so this was a blood-sucking moment.
It was funny. I had watched the movie a while ago, Karen. It was the show that I hadn't watched, and I've watched a couple episodes of the show now. I love the movie. So, but that's just interesting because it's like you're seeing a lot of consolidation because they just bought RB Digital a couple months ago, which was basically a competitor to them. And they were recently bought by an investment firm. And so it seems like they're consolidating some of the library service providers, which could be a good thing or it could be a terrible closing.
That's the scary part. Well,
Yeah.
when I look at the next news article, it was particularly kind of depressing.
Yeah.
Oxford University Press has announced the final closing of its printing arm. They were first granted the right to print books in 1586, and they've been in steady operation since the 17th century. Their financial woes were exacerbated by the pandemic, and the closure will result in 20 jobs that were still in existence going away. But oh, that's so bad to see something go after all these years.
Yeah, I mean, centuries of publishing books and they're closing. It is really sad. And this is another one. The article is really interesting. It's actually at the Guardian, and they talk to one of the leaders of the union at Oxford University Press, and they did not have good things to say about the management. So go check that out if you're interested. All right, our last piece of news. Since the last episode, there was an auction that raised money to help the children of Palestine called Books for Palestine. It raised over $83,000 by auctioning off over 600 items, including signed books, exclusive swag, critiques, and video chats with publishing pros, including me. Yeah, I did a 30-minute video chat, and my agent is actually one of the people running it. So, sorry, I just saw Lone Stars thing. I got distraction. Yeah, my agent was one of the ones running it. She didn't ask me, but I donated a critique, and I wrote actually the article that you're gonna find in the comments for Book Riot. But what was really interesting, Eric Smith had donated a critique and a call, I think it was, and they did like this extra bidding period at the end, or I guess it was like more like a live auction, and it went for $6,000.
That always impresses me when I'm at any conference and something is auctioned off, and you see a few hundred here, a few hundred there. Something just goes crazy. Years ago, I saw a Sue Grafton one that, I was going, I think we could underwrite her for the year if this is really purchased.
Yeah. I'm just like, I don't have that money, but you go ahead. Yeah, Lotso was saying about Oxford. I think no one has made a Save the Oxford University Press campaign. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it was kind of a done deal. Like it's treated like it's a done deal. So maybe that's why.
Yeah, it sounds like it was done in stages.
Yeah. All right, cool. So that's it for news today. We're going to switch over to the other segment. So when I do the regular Pub Talk Live, not the Author Journeys one, I have a guest co-host and a special guest. But on Author Journeys, you're kind of both. So now you're switching over from guest co-host to special guest. There you go.
I'll fix my hair.
All right. So kind of let's start a little bit at the beginning of your writing journey. When and why did you decide that you wanted to be a author?
I think very young. I love to tell stories and to write stories. However, I really thought as I progressed that I was going to be a journalist. And people come into your life. I did all the high school journalism, the debate and all that. But people come to your life, and I was applying for colleges, and I was applying to Syracuse, to Northwestern, anything that had a really good, tight journalism program. And my journalism teacher looked at me and said, "No, you're not going to be that kind of journalist." And I said, "Oh," and she looked up and she said, "No, you need to go. You've been accepted to University of Michigan. You need to go there. Marshall McLuhan's there, and all this free thinking is going on there, because you're going to end up being in a more wide thing. You're never going to be tied down." And at the very last minute, I took her advice and I went to University of Michigan. That's where the book comes from. That's where, but that was, it was a good decision for me. But then I wanted to write, but I didn't do it. I think so many of us who are out there, and probably a lot of you out there, we talk about it a lot. And I was the talker of the year. I talked about it for years. I was the one who, when first I became, I left undergrad with two goals in mind, Sarah. I wanted to go to New York. So I graduated early in December. I went to New York 2 days later with two goals. I wanted to get a job in publishing because I still wanted to go that route. And I wanted to get on Jeopardy. Those are my goals. And in case they didn't work out, I every night was, in those first days, was typing applications for law school for the following fall. I got lucky. Both of my goals came to be. And I realized I didn't want to be at the bottom of the heap, because the bottom of the publishing company is kind of mundane. So I decided I'd go to law school, and it doesn't pay well. So I decided I would go to law school, and I did that fall. And from that point on, the next few years, I'm the one who writes things like the parties, the skits for your organizations, but I'm not writing real stuff. I'm writing the most boring briefs and things. And then I get on the bench and I'm writing even more boring decisions. So, but I kept talking about it. And just to wander one further thing, one of my friends said to me, well, one friend dragged me to a writer's conference. And as a result of that, I came back the next year and I entered all the competitions, and I didn't win in anything fiction. I thought for sure I would. I won on an essay that was Maybe I Should Hug You, with what happens when a woman starts turning 50 and becomes her mother, and her friends change in life and what's going to happen. It was a very short essay, but More Magazine online picked it up. Then I kept talking still, and a friend of mine said, look, if you want to write, leave the 4 kids with Joel, come with me to the beach. I'm not going to bother you except for dinners, because we both like to eat. I want you to get up every morning. I want you to write for the 3 days we're there. And if you can do so, then maybe you'll do something. If not, I don't want to hear about it again. Well, we went and I wrote longhand on legal pads, and I saw the sun come up, I saw dinner, and I saw the sun go down. But I ended up with 85 pages of legal pages, 5 of which ended up being in maize and blue. I could see the beginning, the middle, and the end, and that was how I got going.
Yeah. So your friend was like, either do it or shut up about it.
That was exactly what she said, but she didn't put it as nicely as you just did.
I was going to ask about something, but I was listening and I forgot. I might remember. All right. So what did your journey from there to kind of traditional publication look like?
It was an accident, literally an accident. I wrote that book and it was horrible. I went up to some authors, I'm reading it. My body's not dropping till page 85. And I don't know how many of you know Anne George. Anne George was she wrote the Bad Hair Mysteries, and she was the poet laureate for Alabama. But she wrote all the same kind of mysteries I liked to write. So I went up there and I said, I'm having a really bad problem. The book stinks. It's really, not working. What can I do? And she says, and I said, I'm not dropping that body. And she said, you have to drop the body. She says, I have the same problem. So what I do is I just drop it on the first page and let it go. And I had just read her brand new book, and she has 2 characters sitting there talking, and all of a sudden a body drops by the window. And I said, I guess she really did mean what she just told me.
Yeah.
But my journey began as follows. I wrote the book. I kept writing it over years. It kept going in the drawer, coming out, going in, coming out. And then I thought it was finally ready. Shortly after I won that other contest, I was hosting the Women's Forum, which was a group in Birmingham, Women's Network, I should say. And I had 115 people in the audience, and I was showcasing 4 women authors. And I wanted to be the moderator, because I think a moderator should be dull like the wall behind me. And I wanted to showcase these women, and that's what I was doing. So everything went fine. We get to opening questions, and the first hand that goes up is somebody fairly prominent in the community who says, tell us about your writing. And I looked at her and I said, I guess you're referring to Maybe I Should Hug You, and it went on. And I said, now let's get back to these 4 women. Next question. Tell us what else you're writing. Well, I think I have a mystery that's ready for the world. And I went back to the 4 women, and that was the end. Now, I go home, and a few hours later, my BlackBerry goes off. Now, this is when we still had BlackBerries, so it's a decade ago. And my BlackBerry goes off, and I was a crackberry. I look at it, and I go, because the message on it says, my friend so-and-so, who was in your audience, who's a big PR person in town, wrote to me. I'm co-owner of such and such publishing company, Chalet, and she says there's a judge with a mystery, and she's read other things by you, and she thinks I should read it. Would you like me to? My answer was, how would you like me to send it to you, with a red ribbon or a blue ribbon? She said, no, I want it back in an email. This is the heading. So I did exactly what she said. And I figured, what's she going to do if she doesn't like it, Sarah? She's going to hit delete.
Yeah.
About a week later, one of the kids was in. I'm a stepmom too, and so this kid has children, and so we're taking her to Vulcan, which is a museum and statue in Birmingham, and she is running up, and it's hard to go from the parking lot to where the entrance is, and I'm dragging behind. The kids are a mile away, and all of a sudden I look at my BlackBerry because it's going off, and I said, and I parted my French because I know I'm on a podcast thing. I went, oh shit. And my daughter turned around and says, we don't talk like that when there's children. And I said, the children are up there. Oh shit. So Stephanie came down because she now thought I was having a heart attack. I turned it to her and she looked at the one sentence message. And the message was, my partner Joy and I have read Maize and Blue and would like to offer you a contract. And so I won't say it a third time. She said the same thing I did. Anyway, I didn't know any better. I took the contract and I ran with it, and everything was going great. I was on the way to Malice and things, and the company decided to go out of business. But they did give back, the three of us who were selling all of our materials. They'd been in business for 5 years. So my journey then moves, because I still want to do traditional. So I talked to all these agents. I talked to everybody. And they said, which I'm sure you've all heard, write something new. You've sold too many. Nobody's going to buy this. You've got to write something new. So I wrote the Carrie Martin book, Should Have Played Poker. I'm hoping it's going to be a series. I go to Killer Nashville, and you can read 2 pages. An agent and an editor will read them. It's kind of like a pitch type thing. And if they like it, they can ask for it. So the first session, they give me all this praise. I said, would you like to read the rest? And the editor goes, no. So I asked to speak to her afterwards, and she explained that she was there to buy a specific type of book. And she explained what it was, and that she felt certain I would sell. Okay. A few hours later, I go into a second session like this. Only this time, praise was the same. But this time when I asked, would you like to read the rest? She said yes. And 5 Star bought the book a week later. I thought publishing was easy. But they bought it in August of 14. It wasn't going to come out until 16 because the 15 calendar was filled. So I went home, and as many of you know, 5 Star, after it came out and was doing okay, 5 Star decided they were no longer going to do mysteries. So I was told, go write something else. And let me get into the Sarah Blair books. I decided I wanted to still write either cozy or traditional with cozy elements. Those of you who know cozy know it's a small town. Well, I can do small town. I've litigated all over the state in small towns. I can do amateur sleuth. That's easy. I can do a cat on the cover, as you can see in One Taste Too Many. Cat on the cover. Oops, I'll bring it back in the picture. Okay, because all cozies always have a cat or a dog on the cover, and I can do some of the other things. But then I realized cozies usually have food, or they have like a good cook or a baker, or they have crafts. I'm not good in crafts. I do not cook. I hate to cook. I hate the kitchen. And I said, well, maybe I guess I can't write a cozy. And then I thought about it, and I thought, I bet there's some readers out there like me who find the kitchen more frightening than murder. And that is the premise of Sarah Blair. She's not me, except in the fact that she was married at 18, divorced at 28. I'm about to hit a pretty high number of years married. Only thing she gets out of the marriage is the cat I just showed you on the cover of One Taste Too Many. But she is a woman like me who has a drawer with like plastic knives and things because of all the takeout and food of convenience. But I gave her a twin, and the twin is an excellent chef. And the only thing is, so I sent it in, I wrote it, and Kensington bought the series. The one thing I thought funny about it is they also told me after they bought it, and we need recipes. And Sarah, I looked at myself and I said, you got to be kidding. I don't cook for my husband. I'm going to come up with recipes for you. And they said, yes, we need recipes. So One Taste Too Many has the rhubarb crisp that's on the cover, but it also has Jell-O in a can, which was a 1950s recipe that all the women's magazines had, because I started looking for recipes. And Jell-O in a can, you can't screw it up. It's Dole pineapple and Jell-O got together, and all it is you take a can of the Dole pineapple rings, you make the Jell-O in the can, put it in the refrigerator. When you bring it out and dump it on your plate, turn it gracefully on your plate. And you have to be careful because in the 50s, the cans didn't have lips like they do now. So you have to be able to help it out a little bit today. But back then, it would just slide out. And then you cut between the rings. And I have a wonderful picture of, when we go to talk to groups, the thing is, it comes out perfectly. But one of the people, when I went to a group, I walked in, and there on the table, in green, yellow, and orange, was this recipe made, and it's lying on a silver tray. I thought, and the other one in that book, I take anytime you invite me. If you invite me, Sarah, for dinner and ask me to bring a vegetable, you're going to get this spinach pie made with spinach souffle. The second book, Two Bites Too Many. That one I put in a lot of wine spritzers and recipes like that. By Three Treats Too Many, I had added vegan recipes, and I also added soups. So that's why when they made the cover for this one, as you can see, rest in peace. And the new one, Four Cuts Too Many, which is the one we're now talking about, I brought in knives. And as you can see, the knife is in here and the cuts of cheese and things. But so that Kensington's been great on the covers, but I crack up because the recipes are a few are, a little more difficult, but most are for the cook of convenience.
All right. Jennifer said, I love foodie cozies. I do too. People have been around for a little while. They know I love to cook. If you see my Instagram, I'm a great cook. I love to cook. So
I'm not. But I'll read it.
So if I invite you for dinner, it's okay. I'll do all the cooking. It's fine.
I'll come in. I am great at that.
I did want to ask. I remembered what I wanted to ask earlier. So you did make it on Jeopardy?
Yes, I did, and I lost. I lost to a 5-time winner. He and I. The way they do it in the tryouts and everything back then, the tryout was really funny because we had to come to New York. Today it's done on computer. And so they would have us come in, and there'd be like 50 of us in the room. And I was told, be eager. So I was. They took your picture back then, and they put it on supposedly your application. And they played games with you. Like they played Blue. Sarah, they would say, okay, they'd just go around the room, and they would say, Blue, give us a question. They'd give you the answer and you'd have to come up with something. Well, it was great if you were one of the first people. What color is the sky? What color is the wall? If you were about the 8th person, you were out of luck. Anyway, in my case, I did get on, and the guy and I were literally neck and neck all the way through. The question was history. You would have thought I would have answered it. All I could think of was it's the Peter O'Toole character in all, a man. I could think of the movie. I could think of everything about it with Richard Burton and this and that, but I couldn't think of the name, the historical name. So I went home with $100. But it was a great experience. I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Did they film in New York? Is that?
Yes, they.
Why is related to your?
Yeah. When they finished, at one point they had us all playing a written game. They supposedly we were being tested, and we had 50 questions. It was up on the board type thing. We were putting them down, and afterwards they collected it. And we knew they could. If you thought about it, there's no way they could grade it that fast for that many people. But everybody was freaking. And you have to remember, I'm young. I have confidence in myself. I mean, I've just, So I said, the guy next to me is going, I'm sure I blew it. I couldn't remember which opera had the elephant in it. And I'm looking at him, Aida. And, everybody's free. You knew you couldn't answer every question because it was every different area. But it was funny. At the very end, they called 4 of us up. We have a problem with your applications. They called us up. We thought, oh, gosh, what's wrong with the application? We stood up there, and they waited till everybody had left the room. They said, okay, you're the only 4 who made it out of this group. And then they had to come back for a rehearsal.
Oh, wow.
But I will say, here's one little trick. If you're ever writing about this, a guy had to bring a change of his tie. He doesn't have to change his outfit. They taped the shows like 5 in a day. Okay. A woman had to bring a change of an outfit. Now, if you're one, you'd be putting back on the first outfit. You know, but the audience looks to see what a woman's wearing. So that's why, if you've ever noticed, you'll notice if somebody's on there in a uniform, because you'll see it every day and it'll hit your mind. But subconsciously, you'll go over the fact that she's got a different outfit on, and you'll be okay with it.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I'm just like, I'm thinking about Jeopardy now. So of course you would. Lodestar said, I'd personally rather change my entire outfit. That's because of who you are as a person, Lodestar. All right. So you told us a little bit about what happened after you signed your first deal, but maybe talk about kind of your publishing experience, like your experience working with a publisher, maybe this last time around working with Kensington. Were there any surprises along the way? Like what was the actual working with a publisher like after you signed the deal?
Yeah. Kensington in some ways is very much like working with 5-Star and with the first publisher. They were all traditional publishers. The difference on the for Kensington has asked for input into the covers, but not into the art, more of what do I think. And in those, cozies often have very elaborate pictures or they have very simple covers, and I asked them to please go simple, which is what they did. They asked for, but I have no say over the cover. When I get it, that's it. In terms of working with them, I turned in the manuscript. An editor went over it, and any corrections and things, were brought to my attention. You have both developmental editors, you have other editors. I think one of the funnier ones actually happened with 5-Star, because I turned in a book there, and they had somebody go over line edit, and I was clean on most of that, but they had somebody else who was doing more of fact checking. And I get a note back, this is good, but on page 183, you can't have those flowers on the table. And I went, huh? And the end, so I actually wrote back because it didn't explain to me why. I said, I don't think I understand this. Is there something wrong with having the flowers on a table? I said, no, you can't have those flowers because they won't be blooming for 6 more weeks in the state of Alabama. I mean, that's how detailed they were in checking it.
Yeah.
I lost the vase. I decided the table could be empty.
Yeah.
But working with Kensington, we came up with a timeline. They bought the first book, which was The One Taste Too Many, and they bought that, and we did the edits. And then by the time the galleys and things were coming due, I had 11 months to write the second book. By the time they did the cover, they did all the edits, and they got it to the point of publication. That was January of 19. Okay. While they were doing that, I was writing the other book because they'd bought it, 6-7 months earlier. I turned in the book. So during the next few months, I'm sitting there promoting. At the same time, I'm also working on, here comes the edits, here comes the proofs, here comes the final galley, in the arcs. And so it's kind of a step in time type process. Once you get into it, you have to just learn how to balance it. And I mean, the irony is this 4 Cuts Too Many just came out on May 25th, but on May 12th, I turned in 5 Bells Too Many, which has now been accepted, and that'll be coming out in June of 2022. So that's kind of the process. It's a revolving door while you're under contract. In the beauty of it, they wanted to bring out the first 2 close because that is the philosophy that if they're close, people will get into the series. So the way that worked, they had it in the process. They brought one out in January. They brought one out by the summer. Then they waited a year to bring out 3 Treats Too Many to August. And now this one in May of, 20 and 21, and the next one will be 22. So once they got the series going, now it's a rotation.
Yeah, interesting. So, you'd went into law and then you became a judge, correct?
Yes.
Were you kind of writing at the same time you were a judge?
I was writing those skits and things,
Okay.
and I was talking about it. I was very fortunate, sir. The average age for the judgeship that I was appointed to was 58. I was 36 when I got it.
Oh, wow.
I had had a case of first impression, which is a lawsuit that is not anywhere else, had not been decided, but I did a higher education one. And that and my writing helped propel me into getting this early appointment. So I was 37 when they actually swore me in.
Oh, wow.
They send you to judge school, and the oldest person in my class was 72, and I was the baby. That gives you an idea, because like I said, the average age, and at that time, there were very few women in the role. Today it's gone bigger, but that's why I was able to be on the bench for so many years, because I got on so early.
Wow. And you had a lifetime appointment.
I did.
And you gave it up.
Yes, I did.
So
I'll tell you why.
Yeah. So I have the question why, but we also, so Patreon supporters can submit questions ahead of time. So Lodestar also had questions about this. So his questions were, what was it like? And did colleagues and other professionals in your network, how did they react to it?
They thought I was crazy. I'll explain why.
Yeah.
When you have a lifetime appointment and you don't have to run for office or anything, it's cozy. And they were all male, practically. So I'd been on the bench by that point 20 plus years. After 20 years, you have the lawyers trained. And I was very serious on the bench. And you have to treat everybody with dignity. Mm-hmm. So good case, bad case, you treat them with dignity. Oh, easy street. Maybe you think so. Anyway, but I had the lawyers trained. At the end of every hearing, they would say, I'd say, is there anything further? They'd say, no, Your Honor. And I'd do a standard closing. On this particular day, I had a lawyer in front of me who I'd known forever. In fact, we used to litigate against each other. Excellent lawyer. I got to the closing. I said, is there anything further? The lawyer said, no, Your Honor. And book-wise, this is that year of the gap before that I'm waiting to get the next book out. And I kept the two careers very separate. And the lawyer, I looked at him, gave him that look like, get your client under control. And he went, which gave me the idea that he couldn't control this particular client. So I looked at the client and I said, yes, sir, what is it? And he goes, Your Honor, I just want you to know one thing. No matter how you rule, I'm going to buy your book. I kept a straight face. Sarah, I'm sure he did not buy my book. I ruled against him. But I went home that night and I told my husband, I said, we just got the last kid out of school, I think. I said, I'd like to run the numbers because I really have this passion that I want to write. And if the numbers work, and yes, DT, if Easy Street is going to work, I am going to, I'm going to walk out. And my husband looked at me, but he knew how much it meant to me. We ran the numbers. We figured it would work. I went in the next morning and I said, okay, everybody, I'm calling a meeting. I want you all to know I am taking no more cases. I am going to work out my docket. I'm not just walking out tomorrow. I'll be here probably another 6-7 months, but no more cases and I will be resigning. And they looked at me and the first thought was that, are you sick?
Yeah.
They thought I was ill or dying. I said, no.
Do you mind me asking, how old were you at that point?
I was just getting close to the average age. I hadn't quite hit it yet. And the way I looked at it was, if I could stay healthy for another 20 years, I could have a whole new career. So to me, this was, why sit on the bench for another 20 years if I had a chance to do what I really now wanted to do? Mm-hmm. And so I walked in, as I said, the guys thought I was crazy, giving up something where I had a very good salary, I had great bennies, and I'm going to go do something that you may or may not succeed at. So that's what I did. And, they thought I was insane, but I walked out and I haven't looked back. It's probably the best decision I ever made for me.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's
Not everybody would go that way, but like I said, I have had, since I did it, I've only been out of the job now for about 6 years. I guess, 6 years. And it's been an adventure. I'm in my second childhood because, now that I finally hit the average age, the guys think it's, they come to the book signings.
Cool. Very cool. All right. So you're involved with a lot of writing organizations like MWA and SYNC. What impact do you think these organizations have kind of on careers of writers? How do you think they help writers?
I think they're very good for a number of reasons. I was at a conference and a woman sat next to me who happened to be the keynoter of that particular conference. And she was the first one who told me about these groups. I didn't know enough about them. Remember, I'm the one who got published by accident. And that was that time. And she told me about them from a mentoring standpoint. What I have found, and I got active, if you get active in them, you make friends, you mentor. I have found the crime fiction community extremely warm and welcoming. And I have these people who would give me a kick in the pants or support me. And that's one of the things I've gotten out of it. I've taken great classes. I've taken great networking. I think every organization offers something different, but it's the relationships that to me have been the most important. I'll give you an example. I had a short story that was the Anthony and the Agatha finalist for, and it was my first story ever published in Alfred Hitchcock magazine. I hadn't had the guts to send a story in to Alfred Hitchcock. And two of my other friends I made through these organizations, Terry Moran, who I'm going to give her a plug tonight, if I may. She has just taken over the Jessica Fletcher Murder, She Wrote book series. And the book just came out this week, her first book, which I think is the 53rd book in the series. But she and Bob Mangio, who I also met and would never have known in any other way, both great story writers, both said, you can do it. Just write it and send it. And it gave me the confidence to try it. What's the worst thing that can happen? A rejection? Oh, then I can go home and cry. But yeah, but they liked it. They the night they burned Miss Dixie's place, they published it, and I even got a credit on the cover. And then the story took off, and that was really wonderful. Plus, when something good happens to you, whoever you are, whether it's in a pitch war or it's in anything, they come and surround you with support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, obviously, I love writing organizations, so
I got that.
All right. So we have another question from patron supporter Lodestar, a kind of funny one. So if you've listened to my podcast or heard me send people my website, I often say Sarah with an H, Nicholas without an H. So Lodestar was wondering, how often do you need to do the same for your name?
I have to do it all the time, and there is a reason. When I first started writing, I was told, go out and get all the social media stuff. Well, I went to get a website. Deborah Goldstein was taken. I went to get something else. Deborah Goldstein was taken. So I finally Googled this Deborah Goldstein and discovered there were two other ones. One is this great neuropsychiatric person in New York who writes all these treatises. Okay, she doesn't Google up to the top, but she does exist. But the one who Googled to the top at the time was this beautiful, much blonder, much thinner, much younger woman who wrote about text flirting. And I decided that might not be where I should go. So I decided I would use my middle initial. And when I did that, I was able to get websites and Facebook pages and things. So I end up having to go, it's Deborah H. Goldstein. Because same way you have to throw the H, because otherwise people are going to, in the very beginning especially, they would Google and get her. I had a very exciting thing happen this week. She must not be as prolific as she was, because she's on my BookBub. It's got my Maize and Blue, it's got the poker book, and it's got all these, and they had just updated it with the 4 Cuts Too Many. And when they updated it, I wanted to see what it looked like. So I go to my own page and I see, oh, there's my books. And now mixed in are Text Flirting and something else that was from the same version. So I had to contact BookBub and say, I'm Deborah H. She's Deborah. Can you remove her, please?
Yeah.
And they did.
Yeah, I'm a Goodreads librarian, so I sometimes have to help authors with if they write under the same name. I don't know if you know this, but the way that Goodreads differentiates between 2 authors with the exact same name is it puts an extra space in between the names.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah. So if there was like another Sarah Nicholas and who became published after me, their name on Goodreads would be Sarah space Nicholas. Yeah. So if you ever have that problem, that's what's going on.
I'm going back to check it after we get off the air.
Yeah. Yeah. I write under a pen name too. And I have a cousin with my real name who self-published a pretty bad post-apocalyptic novel, and I didn't want people to think it was me.
Well, I didn't think about going under a pseudonym at first, even though I was keeping the 2 things, as I said, separate. So, but I figured, other than a few headlines that the PR people picked up Judge Wright's book, I figured, what were the chances of them picking up Judge Wright's book? In the reality of the people that I was running into. Of course, I go to my first signing, and all of a sudden a bunch of the lawyers who appear in front of me show up, and I'm going, I don't know if this is good or if this is bad.
Well, just feel like, what's her name? Stacey Abrams did it too.
Yes, she did.
All right. Lodestar had said only an extra space. That sounds like a nightmare. It is a nightmare, and it's really confusing. And librarians know this, but most authors don't know this. So they're like trying to figure out how to do it. So always just reach out to a Goodreads librarian if you have a Goodreads problem, because we know the weird tricks like that. All right, Deborah, can you tell us more about 4 Cuts Too Many in case anyone wants to check it out?
Sure, I'd love to. 4 Cuts Too Many, as we've said, is the 4th one in the series. And Sarah Blair is still frightened of being in the kitchen, but life is finally looking up for her. She lives in a carriage house that's owned by her cat. She owns a big house, and her sister and her sister's boyfriend have put a restaurant in there. But the only way they would agree to do it, Southwind, a white tablecloth restaurant, she had to become an owner because she was giving them part of the building to do it in. So now she's got access to owning a restaurant, even though she doesn't dare go. They won't let her in the kitchen. But like Louise Penny, I want you to know my community. And so one of the things, I made it this small town, Wheaton, Alabama. Everybody knows everybody, and it's not that big. But I keep taking you in every book to a different part of the community, though I use some of the same settings, the office she works in, the place she lives. But this book, I brought in higher education. I brought in a community college. And I also believe in evolving characters. So somebody who was a sous chef to her sister in the first book and who works for her sister and is mentioned in all the books is now the predominant player, because not only is she still working for the restaurant, she is doing adjunct teaching of knife cuts at the community college. Unfortunately, she gets into a little bit of a tizzy with her department head, and Sarah's outside waiting for her, and well, they discover that the department head's dead and the knife in her neck belongs to the adjunct. So Sarah has to decide, has to figure out how to get her off, and find out who really did it. But the interesting thing is, this is the first book where Sarah, who is truly an amateur and tries to stay out of this, is actually concerned. Maybe she did do it.
Oh.
Because there are issues. There are a number of characters who could be the red herring or could be the person the perpetrator. But all she knows is Sarah is going to learn more about slicing and dicing than she ever dreamed possible.
All right. And that is Sarah with an H, right?
Yes, it is with an H.
All right. So last question for you, Deborah. It's a question I ask every guest on my show. What is the most important book you've ever read and why?
The book I would pick is Damned If You Do and Damned If You Don't. It is a book by Marjorie K. Osterman. It came out years and years and years back. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Mm-mm. Her husband was won all these writing awards. She just wrote a few things. But this book, an aunt had it on her bookshelf, and I picked it up almost like as a tween. And I started reading it, and it's a dynasty story. It is the Jews in New York going through the garment industry and such, and it goes from the Civil War to World War II. And what I liked about it is it was fascinating because that was the first time I saw how a book could be structured, how the story could evolve, how characters could go from one generation to another. Books like that, or Cynthia Freeman did it in Portraits. A number of people have done it over the years where they'll do more than one generation. I think Barbara Bradford used to did it in, and I can't remember the name of the book that was her big breakout with the same kind of concept. But I thought it was fascinating that she could keep me so interested. So I have gone back periodically and reread it. It was probably written to be competition to things like Paid in Place and different things of that nature when it came out, but it was well crafted, and it won a bunch of accolades at the time. So I use that, and I guess if I had to pick some other books, I'd go with Giant by Edna Ferber and a few others like that, because I love the diversity. Again, it's the story, and it's watching the evolution of the characters.
Nice. Cool. Very cool. All right. So I don't have an audiobook of the week this week. Tune in next week. I think I will have one because I'm really liking the one I'm listening to right now. And now we're going to talk about the viewer poll. So the question is, when do you think you'll be returning to larger in-person book events? So let's see what people said. We have 31% said they think they'll be returning by the end of this year. 26% said by first quarter of next year, and 31% said by summer of next year, and 13% said sometime later.
When do you think you'll be returning, Sarah?
I think the first one I'll be going to is in February, and it's Coastal Magic Convention, which Jennifer, who runs it, is in the comments, and that's a paranormal romance, urban fantasy, primarily small convention in Daytona Beach every February. And I've been going since it started, and we were virtual last year, or this year, I guess. But it's going to be in person next year. So that's the first one I'm booked for, though. Necronomicon, which is a small science fiction literature convention in Tampa that I often go to, they're doing in September, but I haven't decided yet, but I wasn't invited as a guest, so I don't know. We'll see. I think it also kind of just depends on what happens the next couple of months. We're looking at different kinds of variants popping up, and what effectiveness the vaccine has against those variants. I have an immune disorder, so I have to be a little careful. But I'm vaccinated. And it took, which some people with immune disorders, they got vaccinated and it didn't take, basically. So that's good. That gives me a little bit of confidence. Yeah. Like I went to Publix the other day and didn't feel like anxious for the first time. So
well, it's funny because I have just started walking in and out of the grocery, but I'm still having most of the groceries delivered. I'm still a little nervous about all this, and yet I think I'm going to go to my first convention at the very end of August.
Oh yeah. Which
yeah.
one is that?
That's Once Killer Nashville.
Oh, okay.
But I had a presentation I was supposed to make there last year, so I'm supposed to make it this year. But I keep going, will I be at every workshop or will I be in my room? But
yeah,
I'll be like you. I'll be watching to see what happens. And then I'll be looking into them later in the year, and the beginning of 2022.
I actually did. I found out today that I got a scholarship to Podcast Movement, which is a podcast convention.
Mm-hmm.
And I can use it for a virtual ticket or an in-person ticket. And I was really, really debating, like, maybe I should go in person because the networking in person is just far above what you can do virtually, you know? Sure. But then I remembered that my parents will be out of town and there's no one to watch my dog. So that made the decision for me.
That makes a very big decision quickly.
Yeah. It's also in Nashville, so yeah.
Well, Nashville's a good town to visit. But,
yeah, Jennifer said I'm about 90% sure I'll be going to Dragon Con, unless things take a turn between now and then. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what a lot of us are going to do when we first go back. We're going to be watching to see what's going on in the world and what's going on in our communities to make sure it's safe. I mean, that is actually how Mystery in the Midlands got to be virtual last year. We were the first ones practically, because I said to my cohort in crime, we cannot do this in Carolina. And it was a darn good thing we didn't do it in Carolina. Yeah. If you remember, they went sky high.
Yeah.
And we got like 900 people last year to this conference because nobody was zoomed out yet.
Yes. Yeah. We're actually doing, I think we're going to be doing, at my library, my day job, I plan a writer's conference every year for the library. And we did it virtual this year and people loved it. And I will say I'm very good at planning virtual events. Like I will brag on myself a little bit. But I think we're actually going to do it virtual again next year. It's in January every year. Mainly because it is a lot of people in small rooms, you know? And so in order to, like, if we wanted to make it fewer people, it would be less accessible. We didn't want to do that, you know? But we are going to be doing some extra kind of in-person writing workshops in January and February, so that if people do want to come in person, they can for those. But yeah.
Well, I think in August and September, I'm talking to different groups and there are libraries that are just starting to reopen. And that's what, somebody asked me, do you mind if we do both virtual and you'll do it live because we're going to space the people out in front of you?
Yeah.
And I said, that's fine. I'm still nervous, but I'm going to be doing some of these things in a few months.
Yeah, I'm nervous too, but I also I'm an extrovert. So I love being around people. I love talking to people. I think my favorite part about conventions is not the programming. It's, those conversations you have in the hallways and at lunch and, just getting to chat with people. I love that so much. So.
Well, that goes back to what we were talking about 20, 30 minutes ago. Why do I do the groups?
Yeah.
Because of the networking and the mentoring.
Yeah.
It's the networking that's worth it.
Yeah. That's a great thought to end on. So thank you, Deborah, so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. So I'm going to just do the outro and I'll see you in a minute.
Take care.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, whether you're watching live or watching the replay or listening to the podcast version. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like and subscribe right down there so you don't miss another episode, and tell your friends because that's how they find out about stuff like this. You can also, as a reminder, subscribe via email in the description, and you can also find the Patreon link in the description. Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters. You're going to see their names at the end of the broadcast, and we are at 23 of my goal of 25. So once we get 25 Patreon supporters, we're going to start doing a monthly kind of Q&A, publishing Q&A. So just a heads up on that. We're so close. And the social media for Deborah and her website and everything is in the description. Upcoming, we have on Thursday, I have a workshop on finding a literary agent. That's a $10 workshop on Crowdcast. So If you know anyone who's kind of like starting their journey to publication, you may want to let them know about that. Like I said, it's going to be kind of like a 101 kind of thing. So some of you may be a little past that. Yeah, only 208, let's say. And we had Queries, Qualms, and Quirks this past week with Mia P. Manantella. If you haven't listened to that, I thought it was a great episode. And then coming up, I have Catherine Adele West, who is our first literary fiction author guest on Queries, Qualms, and Quirks. And we're still doing the write-ins every Wednesday at 8 p.m. with Beth Carnan. You can just come and work on whatever you're working on, whether it's writing or blogging or something else. So hopefully you'll join us for that. I think that's everything. Everyone stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask. And yes, sorry, I said queeks. I was trying to say quirks and weeks at the same time. All right. Everyone stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask. We'll see you next time. Good night, everyone.